Assalamu alaikum. A very good morning to you all. Today we are going to start English language proficiency. Today, hopefully, we are going to cover active and passive voice, sentence types, and paragraphs. And maybe we'll go into practical language and inclusive language. Now, as you can see on the screen, active and passive voice. In the active voice, the subject of a sentence is the doer of the action. This means in active voice, the subject means the person doing the action. In any sentence, in any paragraph or any phrase, the subject will always be the person or the thing that is doing the action. So in active voice, the subject of the sentence is the person performing the action. Excuse me. For active sentences, follow the usual word order in your sentences: subject, verb, object. Your sentences will be more interesting and easier to understand. That means if you are using active voice, always use the usual word order. Word order means the way words are ordered in a sentence. Usually we use the subject, verb, object, SVO. In a sentence, first there will be the subject, followed by the verb, object, followed by the verb, and then the object which the verb is referring to. So in an active sentence, the word order is SVO, which is subject, verb, object. Your sentences will be more interesting and easier to understand. There are times when the passive voice is useful. Normally in most of the types of writings which we use active voice. We'll go into some examples of active voice. Here are some sentences written in active voice. The new process is believed to be superior by the investigators. In this sentence, the subject is, we'll firstly just read through these examples and go into more details. The office will be inspected by John Rhodes from NYC. It is desired by this office that the problem be brought before the board. Complete renovation was required by the new owners. The letter was typed by Brian, the new assistant. Verbs and voice. Now this is also under active and passive. We are going into some more details of this. Voice in this active and passive voice. So here the voice means it is the form of a verb that takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs or receives the action. That is indicated as the voice. There are two types of voice we have been talking about, active and passive voice. Active voice is used to show the subject of the sentence is performing or causing the action. Previously, we have discussed this. For example, LeBron threw the ball before the buzzer. In this sentence, LeBron is the subject and threw the basketball. Threw is the action verb, and the basketball before the buzzer. Object will be basketball. So therefore, what is the word order which is normally used in active voice? SVO, subject, verb, object. In this sentence, LeBron is the subject, threw is the verb, the action verb, and the object is the basketball, because through is the action and through this verb is referred to is the action, so the object will always be defined by the verb. Therefore, object is basketball. LeBron threw the basketball before the buzzer. So the subject of the sentence is performing the action as written in the definition above. LeBron shot the basketball from the free throw line. LeBron scored 3 points. So in the examples below, LeBron is the person, the subject who is performing, doing the action. So therefore, these are some examples of active voice sentences. Next is passive. Many government documents and policies of large organizations use the passive voice, which sounds quite impersonal. Talking directly to your readers with words like I, you, we, us, our makes your document more personal. Rather than the client can make application to the Department of Motor Vehicles of licensing before June. This is an example. Rather than writing this sentence, the client make applications to the Department of Motor Vehicles for licensing before June 1. Rather than writing like that, we can write, you can apply to the Department of Motor Vehicles for your licensing before June 1st. There you can see a difference. Before it was written as the client can make application to the Department of Motor Vehicles for licensing before June. That is an a different way which you can, rather than writing like that, you can say you can apply to the department. Now when you change it like that, this is a written form, so when the reader feels more connected with and it will be easier to understand when you use passive voice in some cases. All right, there are times when passive voice is useful. When would you want to use passive voice? There are different ways and different times where you have to or you can use passive voice. For example, when you must deliver a bad news. For example, the decision to terminate your lease was agreed upon all members of the committee. Or you can use passive voice to when the subject is not important, when the subject in the sentence is not important, or you don't know the subject. For example, in a sentence or in some cases where you don't know the exact context where the sentence is applied on, you might not know the subject who is performing the action. You might not be informed of that in one sentence because maybe that sentence was extracted from a large paragraph or maybe a book. So we don't know the context, we might not know the subject. Then in that case, you can use passive voice. For example, the children were delighted by the sudden appearance of a clown. In this sentence, we don't know exactly which one is the subject, children or clown. And also in this sentence, children means many, so it's not specific. Next, you can use passive voice when you are not sure who or what is responsible for an action. When you are not sure of who or what is responsible for an action. Their house was broken into last night. For example, their house was broken into last night. We don't know in this sentence, we don't know who broke into their house. So, in cases like this, you can use passive voice. Another way you can use passive voice is when you want to focus attention on the action, not the doer of the action. When you want to focus attention on the action, not the subject, the action verb. Action is in the sense the verb of the sentence, the action verb, and not the subject. For example, when harvest time approaches, the potato plants are sprayed with a chemical to keep them from sprouting. In this sentence, they want to the person, the maybe the author wanted to focus on the action and not the person doing the action, which is in this sentence the action will be spraying the chemicals, but the person it does not mention about the subject, the person who is doing this action. The sentence wants to focus the attention on spraying chemicals to keep them, the reason to keep them from sprouting. Therefore, it's written as when harvest time approaches, the potato plants are sprayed with chemical to keep them from sprouting. Um, now on the screen you can see some similar points. When intentionally trying to hide the subject and the sentence. This is one reason. I think we have gone through all of this. This is one reason where one way which you can use passive voice. For example, a politician might say, the mistake was made by someone. Hiding the subject helps him or her hide the blame. The mistake was made by someone. When we say someone, it's general. We don't know who the subject is specifically. So, in cases like this, you can use passive voice. When intentionally trying to minimize the guilt of subject, for example, a cheating boyfriend might say, cheating was committed by me. When intentionally trying to minimize the guilt of the subject means the person doing the action. So that person in this sentence is accepting his mistake. Third, when passive voice better emphasizes the main point of the message, such as children were harmed by the drunk driver. Forms of passive voice verbs. Before going into that, we'll go back to some sentences. Yeah, we saw this slide before. Now here you are seeing the original sentences which have not been changed to active voice. Now we are going to think and then discuss, see how these sentences will be written when changed to active voice. First is the new process is believed to be superior by the investigators. When this sentence is rewritten, now before I actually give the answers, I want you to try on your own to see how you can change this sentence to active voice. I will be sending activities as soon as possible, hopefully by the end of today. Notes and handouts for yesterday's and today's lessons. All right, now let's see the first sentence. The new process is believed to be superior by the investigators. When this sentence is rewritten in active voice, you can say the investigators think the new process is superior. Because in the original sentence also, the subject is investigators, that is the person doing the action. And in this sentence, what can be the verb, action verb? The investigators think. In this case, think is the verb and object is the new process is superior. Okay, so when it's rewritten, it will be the investigators think the new process is superior. Next, the office will be inspected by John Rhodes from NYC. To change this sentence, we can say, of course, John Rhodes will be the subject. John Rhodes from NYC will inspect the office. When the second sentence is rewritten in active voice, it will be written as John Rhodes from NYC will inspect the office. Next, it is desired by this office that the problem be brought before the board. To change this sentence to active voice, we can say, this office wants the problem brought before the board. Next is a complete renovation was required by the new owners. To rewrite this sentence in active voice, it can be as this office won't. The new owners required a complete renovation. Last, the letter was typed by Brian, the new assistant. We can rewrite it as Brian, the new assistant, typed the letter. So you can notice in all these sentences, when we change all of these sentences to active voice, the subject always comes to the front. The word order for active voice is subject, verb, object. All right. Moving on. Why does it matter? Remember yesterday we talked about the 4 C's of writing, and in that we talked about writing concisely, concise writing, which means shortening. So on the previous slide it says, why does it matter? Strong writing uses active voice. So previously, as I mentioned, we normally use in almost all kinds of writings, we usually use active voice, and there are few few situations where we use passive voice. Now, we use active voice because it gives strong impression on the reader. It gives a strong impression towards your writing. For example, here it says active voice is more direct and concise. When you write in active voice, it says exactly what you want to say in short words, using less words. Passive voice is usually wordier. For example, the ball was thrown by Mohammed. That is a passive voice. When we say it in active voice, Mohammed threw the ball. That's it. So when you think, also you'll notice passive voice sentences are usually longer. Muhammad, the ball was thrown by Muhammad. We can shorten it simply by saying Muhammad threw the ball. Active voice is like watching LeBron play. Passive voice is like watching gum stuck on the bleachers in the stands. Therefore, most of the time in most of your writings, you want to use active voice. The passive voice verbs the passive voice requires a double verb and will always consist of a form of the verb. The passive voice requires a double verb and will always consist of a form of the verb to be and the past participle, usually an ed or t form of another verb. Here it says that the verbs in a passive voice form will usually need a form of the verb or tense to be and the past participle. That is usually the verbs ends in n or ed. For example, active John baked the bread. Passive, the bread was baked by John. Was is a form of verb be or to be. That means past. Here and above form of the verb to be means past tense. Alright, and the past participle. Past or past participle is usually used in passive voice. As you can see in the example, the bread was baked by John. The sentence was is a form of the verb be or to be. Writers should be familiar with the forms of to be, often called linking verbs, so that they can easily identify the passive voice in their work. These are some words of the forms of to be. Am is was, were, be, being, and being. Note the forms of to be in the examples of the verb to kick in various forms of passive voice. Is kicked, had been kicked, was kicked, is going to be kicked. Now these are some examples of verbs being changed into passive voice verbs. Is being kicked, will be kicked. Has been kicked will be changed to can be kicked. Was being kicked will be changed to should be kicked. Now, it's not necessary that you have to learn a verb list like this, but when you start writing these things, these changes, it will come to you automatically. Forms of passive voice verbs. Here's an example. Passive, the cookies were eaten by the children. So in the passive form also we are using the past tense. The cookies were eaten. That means it's already done. I mean the action is already finished. The active form of the sentence, the children ate the cookies. So in active voice we are using the verb form ate, which is simple past tense. In the passive form we are using past participle were eaten. The tunnels are dug by gophers. Active voice, the gophers dug the tunnels. There are four types of sentences. Simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Now, first of all, let's look at, let's see why we need different types of sentences. Why are different types of sentences used? Because if we suppose, for example, if we write a paragraph with only simple sentences, then it will look like maybe, for example, you are writing a letter, and if you are writing it in only in simple letters, simple sentences, then the reader will find it very difficult to understand, because if you are using all simple sentences in one paragraph or in one writing, then you will have to use more shorter sentences, which will make the writing more wordy and more lengthy. So the lengthy and the longer the text gets, it will be difficult, and also sometimes people will find it maybe boring to read the text. Maybe we might have come across situations where you receive an email maybe at office, and it is very long, and then you might find it difficult to read. We all are running after time, right? So we all need to understand, we don't want to spend a lot of time reading a whole paragraph. So it is important that we try to incorporate the different types of sentences in our writing so that it looks easy, it will be easy to read, and it will be concise and complete. Remember the four C's that we talked about. It will be concise and complete. So now let's see. Simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Now, as I said previously, make sure you completely understand, especially compound, complex, and then compound complex. The last three types of sentences are very confusing when it comes to identifying the different types. Okay. Now, by the end of this today's session, I'll send an activity on compound, complex, and simple sentences. I'll give you around 10 or 20 sentences, I think. I'll send you the PDF. I want you to identify the sentences, whether they are compound, complex, simple, or compound complex. All right, so be ready to take notes if you want to. First, we'll look at the basic parts of a sentence. Now, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the sentence structure we talked a little bit about yesterday in passive and active voice. Subject, the word order. Subject, normally we use subject, verb, object. Right, so here is a short, simple example. Mary, it's the subject. As we talked about yesterday, subject is always the person or the thing which is doing the action in that sentence. And then predicate. Predicate here means the verb, the action verb or action verb phrase. All right. Next, this is a very important part which you need to understand. What is a clause? We'll be talking about clauses a lot in the upcoming slides. So make sure you understand this part. What is a clause? A clause is a part of a sentence which is with a verb. So if even if it is two words, if it is a phrase of two words, if it is has a verb, then that is a clause. However, it doesn't have to start with a capital letter and end with a full stop. It can be a short phrase also. For example, we're going to the shops. In this sentence, it does not have any capital letters. That means this could be a middle of a sentence, and there's no full stop. That indicates that this sentence does not stop here. There's some more at the end. But where's the verb in this sentence? We're going to the shops. Going. So we have a verb in this phrase, therefore this is a clause. Basically, a clause will explain or give you a full meaning. A clause gives you a full thought of what is going to be said in that sentence. If a part or the full sentence or like I said before, or a part of the sentence, when you read it and if you do not get a full meaning or if you do not understand the full meaning of what is going to be said in that sentence, then it is not a clause. All right. So what did we understand here? A clause can stand alone if it gives you a full meaning, and it does not have to start with a capital letter and end with a full stop. There are two kinds of clauses, dependent and independent. Independent clause here will be referring to it as sometimes as main clause, and in independent clause, or we will call it main clause, and dependent clause which we will call subordinate clause. Okay, so let's see what an independent clause is. As the word says, an independent clause will stay on its own, which means an independent clause will stay on its own and have its own meaning. An independent clause will give full meaning. You will have a full thought of what the sentence is going to say, what message the sentence is going to convey. An independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand on its own as a sentence. Now, when we say independent clause, it doesn't have to be one whole sentence, okay? It can be a part of one sentence. For example, here you can see learning a new language is often frustrating. Now we are going to use this sentence, this idea for all of the other explanations so that it will be easier to follow. All right. So an independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand on its own. Here, can stand on its own means it will convey its own meaning without depending on another part of the sentence or another word of the sentence. All right. Dependent. Dependent clause does not express a complete thought and needs to be joined to an independent clause to become a sentence. It usually begins with a word such as although, while, because, who, which, if, etc. For example, although learning a new language is often frustrating, up to there, that is a dependent clause. A dependent clause will depend on another part of the sentence to convey its full meaning. Alright? Uh, I hope you have understood this part, dependent and independent clause. So if you have understood dependent and independent clause thoroughly, then it will be very easy to identify compound, complex and compound complex sentences. Okay. Here, here's an example. Aisha is learning a new language, although it is frustrating. In this sentence, although it is frustrating, this part is the dependent clause. Because when we say although it is frustrating, when we read only that part, we do not get a full meaning of it. We do not understand what although what the word it is referring to, right? So we know that this part of the sentence is relying on the first part of the sentence to convey its full meaning. Therefore, Aisha is learning a new language, although it is frustrating. Okay, moving on. First is simple sentence. Simple sentence is simple. A simple sentence has one subject and one predicate. Here, as you can see, we went to San Juan yesterday. In this sentence, went is the action, San Juan, you know where they went, we is the subject, and San Juan is the object because went is the action verb, which means predicate. Yeah. So this is a simple sentence. A simple sentence has just one clause. Alright. There are no additional clauses. Simple sentence is just one clause. There. A simple subject, we, which is a pronoun, went, which is the verb, the action verb, to San Juan, the prepositional phrase. Now we are calling this a prepositional phrase because to San Juan, to the word itself is the preposition, and the word it comes to word it defines is together it is the prepositional phrase. So here to San Juan is the prepositional phrase. It is a complete predicate. Okay. Simple subject we and went to San Juan a complete predicate. So this is how a simple sentence is constructed. Now keep in mind that simple sentence does not mean that it is just 5 or 6 words short. It can be a 10 word or 15 word long sentence. But as long as it has a simple subject and one complete predicate, the sentence will be simple. Okay, here the point is a simple sentence does not mean that it has to be short. It can be really long also. Okay, keep that in mind. Here's another example. Tom and Mary play tennis. Now here, Tom and Mary has become a compound subject. Compound subject means if a sentence has more than one subject. Here, it says Tom and Mary. Tom is one subject, Mary is one subject, and they are both performing the action mentioned in the sentence, play tennis. Therefore, this Tom and Mary becomes a compound subject. Next is compound sentence. A compound sentence has two independent clauses. Now, an independent clause can stay on its own and make a full meaning. And it has full meaning, right? A compound sentence has two independent clauses. And these independent clauses are connected by conjunctions, adverbs, or a semicolon. Okay, let's see an example. We went to St. Juan and most of us danced all night. What do you think is the uh, clauses here? As we saw before, compound sentence has two independent clauses. Therefore, what are the two independent clauses in this sentence? Here you can see we went to St. Juan. Up to there, that is one independent clause. When we say we went to St. Juan, we understand, we get a full meaning. We went to St. Juan. When we stop up to there, we understand what it is saying, we get a full meaning. There it is subject, verb, and the prepositional phrase. And then below you can see most of us danced all night. This is the second independent clause. Most of us danced all night. This is the second independent clause, and these two clauses are joined by a coordinating conjunction and. Alright? We went to St. Juan and most of us danced all night. Now here as you can see, the second independent clause also has a subject, most of us, and a verb, danced all night, modifying phrase. Yes, in an compound sentence, most of the time it will be talking about two different, not different, but two actions will be mentioned. Now, to identify a compound sentence, what you have to look for is not you should not focus on the actions that is happening in the sentence, but focus more on the on identifying the clause. Now, for a compound sentence, you should be looking for two independent clauses. First of all, when you see the sentence, just first read it and then try to identify the clauses. All right. if you see two independent clause like we see right now on the screen, then and then if it is joined by a coordinating conjunction like the word and, I'll send you list of coordinating conjunctions and other different types of conjunctions. Um All right, so keep that in mind when you are identifying the different types of scent. Always look for the type of clause. Okay, do not focus on the action or what is happening or what is written um, on the sentence. Not for this. You do not look for the subject, verb, or the prepositional phrase. Here we have on screen we have I have identified these parts just to explain a little bit more. Okay, but you should be looking for the different clause. Okay, next. Here now you can see some compound sentences. I mean compound uh, coordinating conjunctions. For, and, no, but, or, yet, so. Now, this also does not mean that every time the sentence might be using one of these words. Okay, as we saw before, let's see. Independent clauses are connected by conjunctions, adverbs, or a semicolon. There might be no conjunction, no adverb, just the two clauses connected with a semicolon also. All right. Here's another example. Tom swims and Mary plays tennis. Comma before and is in compound sentences. Now, I think most of the time we say to use comma after a conjunction or a linking word. But if it is a compound sentence, then excuse me. But if it is a compound sentence, always use comma before and. Okay. Conjunctive adverbs, moreover, however, otherwise, and therefore. The list does not end here. There are a lot of conjunctive adverbs. Okay, so just do not think that these are the only words. There are lots of other adverbs. Here's an example. Bob is handsome. Moreover, he is rich. There, as you can see, he is rich. Only three words, but that is one independent clause. Okay. Bob is handsome. First clause, which is connected with a conjunctive adverb. Moreover, he is rich. Semicolon before conjunctive adverb and comma after conjunctive adverb. You should use a semicolon before a conjunctive adverb and then put a comma after the adverb. Next is complex. A complex sentence contains of two parts. Okay, That one that can stand alone and another one that cannot. That means one can stand alone. That means what kind of clothes? Here it means one independent clause and one dependent clause. One that can stand alone, that means one independent clause, and then one that another that cannot stand alone, that means one dependent clause. The part that cannot stand alone is linked to the rest of the sentence by a subordinating conjunction. Alright? Let's see an example. Since my boyfriend and I wanted to have fun, we went to San Juan yesterday. Since my boyfriend and I wanted to have fun, we went to San Juan yesterday. Which part do you think is the dependent clause? First or second part? Since we wanted to have fun, we went to San Juan yesterday. So here, the first part is the part that cannot stand alone, which means since we wanted to have fun, this is the dependent clause. Okay? And then the last part, we went to San Juan yesterday, is the independent clause. When we say we went to San Juan yesterday, when we say that part only, we understand, we get a full meaning. But when we say, just say up to since we wanted to have fun. When we say up to there, we know that there's something at the end. We know that that is not a complete sentence. It does not give a full meaning. And also the first part, it starts with a subordinating conjunction. Here, now in the first sentence, we saw the subordinated conjunction is used at the beginning of the sentence. Here we'll see the connecting phrase used in the middle of the sentence. Is an example. Bob is popular even though he is ugly. In this example, Bob is popular even though he is ugly. The independent clause here is first part. Bob is popular. And then the independent clause is Subordinate in conjunction. Here are some words. The most common subordinating conjunctions are after, although, as, because, before, how, if, once, since, then, that, though, till, until, when, where, whether, and while. These are the most commonly used subordinating conjunctions. Here's another example. The example we saw before, which is explained here. Bob is popular even though he is ugly. Now here, since comma is not used, right? So when we say he is ugly alone, we understand that it can be a dependent clause, but here because comma is not used and we will be here we will have to take Bob is popular as the first clause, and then the second clause will be with will be we will it will be taken with the subordinating conjunction. Will say even though he is ugly. That part, it is the dependent clause. Now, when we say Bob is popular, we get a full meaning. It is the independent clause. But when we say even though he is ugly, we will have to take that part together with the subordinating conjunction. It is the dependent clause. Now here the words have been changed. Even though Bob is ugly, he is popular. Here now the first part of the sentence has become the dependent clause, and then the last part is the independent clause. Okay, next is compound complex sentence. This type of sentence has more than one part that can stand alone and at least one that cannot. Conjunctions link the different parts of the sentence. So, a compound complex sentence has more than one part that can stand alone. That means two independent clause and one that cannot, and at least one part that cannot stand alone. That means one dependent clause. Okay. Here also conjunctions link the different parts of sentences. Here's an example. Since we wanted to have fun, my boyfriend and I went to San Juan yesterday and we danced all night. Now, as you can see, since we wanted to have fun, up to there, this is the dependent clause. which starts with a subordinating conjunction. The middle part, my boyfriend and I went to San Juan yesterday. Went to San Juan. The second part, my boyfriend and I went to San Juan. This is the independent clause, and the last part, and we danced all night. This is also this is the second independent clause. So therefore, in a compound complex sentence, there are three types of clauses. I mean, there are three clauses, two independent and one dependent. Here in this example, the dependent clause is the first part. Since we wanted to have fun, this is the independent clause. Second part, my boyfriend and I went to San Juan. This is one independent clause, and the other independent clause is we danced all night. Okay? Here's another example. Mike is popular because he is good looking, but he is not very happy. Here in this sentence, there are two coordinating conjunctions used, because and but, to link the three parts of this sentence. Now, punctuation, it is basically very simple. Just when we just read through the definitions of comma, brackets, semicolon, colon, full stops, it's very easy, but when we apply it to our writings, it becomes a little bit difficult. Now let's see. Punctuation marks help make meaning clear in written texts. For example, I'll just show you one example. Give me 1 minute. Here, let's eat grandma. You obviously cannot eat grandma, right? So for reasons like this, it is punctuation is very important. Just put a comma there and the whole meaning changes. Let's eat, grandma. So punctuation saves lives. So this is one of the most important reasons why you should use punctuation correctly. All right? Punctuation show the reader where one chunk of meaning ends and another begins. That means, suppose for example, in a long sentence, Punctuation, when you punctuate it correctly, it will show what this part of the sentence means and what the other part of the sentence means. Okay? And where to pause or change tone when reading aloud. Pause and change tone. This is usually used when we use comma or semicolon. We'll look into it in the next upcoming slides. A sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. That makes complete sense. Alright? 3 punctuation marks can show the end of a sentence, that is, a full stop, a question mark, and an exclamation mark. Full stop shows the end of a statement, question mark shows the end of a question, exclamation marks show raised voice, strong feeling, and exclamation. Usually, exclamation marks are used to express a feeling. Okay? And also nowadays, I think capitalization is also a way to express feeling. If it is capitalized, then that means the writer or the person whom you are chatting with is very angry, right? So when you are chatting, sometimes when you get angry, the sometimes people say, "What can you do? You can just capitalize your letters." Right? Sometimes that happens. Okay, moving on. The comma. Within a sentence, a comma shows where one chunk of meaning ends and another begins. This is what we talked about in the previous slide, where one meaning ends and another meaning starts. Okay, let's see. Separating the items in a list. For example, I bought eggs, a pint of milk, tea, and sugar. For example, in this sentence given here, if we did not use comma here, how would it be? I bought eggs, a pint of milk, tea, and sugar. Doesn't really make sense, right? What is we don't know what it is. Eggs, a pint of milk, tea, right? Therefore, we need commas, eggs, a pint of milk, tea, and sugar. Otherwise, it sounds like a pint of milk tea, right? So the information given totally changes. Separating the direct speech from a reporting clause. That means from separating direct speech from reported speech. See, we will go to direct speech later. Separating of tag phrases and names. This is great, isn't it? How old are you, John? This part is especially for reading. Um, we know where to stop while reading. Separating off an introductory chunk. Anyway, I decided not to go. 3 weeks later, James was born. Although she was only 3, Gemma knew her tables. Marking of extra information embedded in the sentence. Jill, my boss, is 28 years old. Yeah, moving on. Next is, well, dash. Do we use dash a lot? A dash gives a break halfway between the comma and a full stop. For example, showing a sharp break between two chunks of meaning. It was great to see you. We must meet again. Marking off extra information embedded in the sentence. Both these chunks are main clauses. A comma cannot separate two main clauses. So here we are using a dash when there are two main clauses. As given in the example, it was great to see you. We can also put a full stop here and start with a capitals letter here at we must meet again. But this is an alternate. We can also use a dash also. Okay, but do not use dash if it is very long sentence. But a short phrase, short sentences like this, in cases like this, you can use a dash. Example, on Monday, the first day of our holidays, we explored the beach. You can also use dash to mark off extra information embedded in the sentence. Here in this example, the sentence is also complete without the part, the first day of our holidays, but just for extra information it is mentioned here. The dash is a feature of informal writing which echoes speech patterns. For the formal equivalency, semicolon. All right, we'll be looking at some phrases and different ways which you could phrase the words while writing in different contexts. Now, there might be some similarities between the previous day's class because previous day we did email writing, and there are some similarities between emails and letters. Okay. Now, this here you can see the objectives for writing a business letter. Assess the situation and your objective. Decide what to say. Put your thoughts in sequence. Identify your subject. End by pointing the way ahead. Now, in a letter, there are different four main parts which you need to consider, which the letter should have these four parts: a salutation, an opening, the main message, and the closing. First, the salutation. A salutation means the part which we write, in other words, the greeting. Dear, normally we start letters with dear, right? To address a person whose name or sex you don't know, use dear sir or madam. When you do not know the name of a man you are writing to, right, you can say dear sir. If you are addressing to a woman whose name you don't know, then you can use madam. When you are addressing a company, you begin the letter with dear sirs. You can also, if you don't know the exact person who is going to receive the letter, you can also write, suppose
Here, in a situation like this, when you are addressing to a company, you can also write to whom it may concern as a salutation. Secondly, we have the opening. This says why you are writing. This is the first line of the first paragraph right after the greeting. To start the first paragraph, the first line, you need to introduce what topic you are going to talk about. Now, in a business letter, as we spoke about in email, in a letter also, we need to go straight to the point. Always say what you want in a short and sweet manner. Okay, therefore, when you are starting a letter also, no need to write, no need to drag to the topic like when we do in essays and other types of writings. But in a letter, always make sure you start with the main point which you want the reader to focus on. So to start a letter, you can start with some of the phrases are given here. We are writing to inquire about, or instead of we, you can say I if you are writing as a person. We are writing in connection with, we are interested in, and we would like to. Now, if you are answering, if you are replying to a letter which you have previously got, then you can start with, we have received your letter of, or thank you for your letter of, or you can say referring to your letter and the letter number. Now, the letters which we exchange with each other in especially formal letters, there's a letter number, right? So we can say with reference to your letter number, and in brackets or without the brackets, you can mention the letter number of the letter which they sent. Understood? The main message or the main body. Now, in the first paragraph, you just mention why you are writing this letter. Okay, and then you come to the next paragraph and then you give a little bit of explanation, some supporting points to the main point. The main message or body, your letter should be neither too long nor too short. The length of your letter will depend on whether the subject of letter is a simple or a complicated one. You, you have to decide on the right amount of info to include in your letter. The reader will not be able to understand the message if you leave out important information. If you include too many details, he may be irritated. So therefore, first thing, always keep it short and concise. Keep it as short as you can, as it is mentioned or you can see on the screen. The length you sometimes varies depending on the topic which you are talking about. Yet, you need to keep in mind that you do not go out of the topic, always stay within the topic which you are discussing about. And also, do not make sure you do not miss any information which needs to be included in the letter. Next is planning. Planning in advance is the best thing to do. In this way, you'll be able to decide what to include in which order and how you are going to express it. The best way to produce a good business letter is to use the KISS formula. Keep it short and simple. KISS, K-I-S-S, it stands for keep it short and simple. The body of most letters can be divided into three paragraphs, though some more may be necessary sometimes. Now, when we look at take an example of, for example, a letter which we are sending in an office. All right, in an office situation, then that letter might not have exactly 3 paragraphs. It might not be that long, it could be that long. Okay, but normally for like in the test which you'll be doing later, I will inform you the date later. Okay, for that one you'll probably have to write 2 or more or 3 paragraphs. Okay, we'll discuss a sample question on how the letter question or email writing task, how the writing task will be in the exam. We'll discuss that in a later class. Okay. Now, there are some things which you should avoid in a formal letter, especially in a formal letter. You should also avoid informal colloquial language as well as phrasal verbs, idioms, and short forms. This kind of vocabulary is considered as inappropriate. Now keep in mind that you should not include colloquial language, phrasal verbs, and idioms and other short forms in a formal letter. Okay, you can use some of these like idioms or short forms in an informal letter, but here we are focusing on formal letters, so you should avoid colloquial language and such in formal language.